Well, hi, and welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. I'm Renee Williams, and I'm here with my co-host, Billy Thomas, and we both work at the University of Kentucky in the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources, and we really appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, certainly. Great to be with you today, Renee. And, we've got some really powerful guests today. We're going to start off today's show with Dr. Amanda Gumbert. Amanda is a water quality extension specialist here in the College of Agricultural, Food and Environment, and she's going to be talking about watersheds and some leadership associated with watersheds and some of those opportunities. So that'll be a great segment. Then we have our ever popular Tree of the Week with Laurie Thomas. And then we're going to be wrapping things up with our very own Dr. Ellen Crocker with another installment of What's Bugging My Tree. So another great show today. If you're joining us via Zoom, you can interact with us via the chat pod. And if you're on Facebook, please use the comment section and we'll respond as quickly as possible. But, Renee, really good show. I'm glad to be here today.
I'm glad to have you back.
Glad to be back. Yeah.
All right, so let's get started. Dr. Gumbert, would you like to turn on your video? Tell us a little bit about what you're going to be talking about today.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm Amanda Gumbert, an extension specialist for water quality here at UK in the Cooperative Extension Service. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about watersheds and specifically ways that you can be a good steward of your watershed, and also learn a little bit more about leadership opportunities in watersheds. So I always like to start out some of my presentations with this quote from Luna Leopold. Luna Leopold was a hydrogeologist with the USGS, and I'm not sure the exact date of this quote, but I think it rings true today as it likely did in the 70s or 80s when it was quoted. And that is that water is the most critical resource issue of our lifetime and our children's lifetime. The health of our waters is the principal measure of how we live on the land. And excuse me, and that is just that to me, that just wraps up all of the work that I do related to watersheds and water quality. And so it's important for us to know that and the reminder is that what we do on the land directly impacts our water quality. So just to start out with a little bit about Kentucky's water, we have more than 90,000 miles of streams and rivers in the state, and we have more than 440,000 acres of lakes. Now, almost all of those lakes are man-made, but that's a lot of water for us to be good stewards of. And the question I want to pose to you right now is, do you know what a watershed is? And many of you have heard this term before, and some of you, this is old hat and you know all about it. This graphic, it kind of gives you a generic sense of what a watershed might look like. And a watershed is just any area of land from which all of the water drains to a common location. And so that water will fall to the ground as precipitation. And of course, some of it infiltrates into the soil, and but some of it runs off. So it also may evaporate through our trees and plants. But as that water moves across the landscape, it interacts with and is impacted by all of the ways that we use the land. And so we have farming, we have woodlands, we have urban areas, we have suburban areas, we have industry, and all of those land uses really impact our water quality. Now, this image is a giant watershed, in fact, and so all of those different colors that you see there make up the Mississippi-Atchafalaya River Basin. And so all of those different colors that are in the white outline, and that drains about 40% of the lower 48 states of the United States. And so that's a really large landmass that drains to one common location, and that is the Gulf of Mexico. And so here in Kentucky, of course, we're over in that purple region, which is the Ohio River Basin. Now, if we look even more closely at Kentucky, Kentucky is divided into river basins, smaller river basins, that is. And so those different colors on this map show you the different river basins that make up Kentucky. And so those are also watersheds. So smaller than the Mississippi River watershed, but they do all contribute to the Mississippi. And then if we zoom in a little closer, this is Fayette County on this map, and you can see these other smaller watersheds. So as we kind of move up the landscape, we get smaller and smaller, or conversely, as you move down the landscape, you get larger and larger watersheds. But suffice to say, everything that we do on the land impacts our water quality. So thinking about that water quality, I can't resist a chance to talk to folks about challenges that our streams in Kentucky have. And these are the 4 things that I like to hit on: volume, sediment, pathogens, or specifically bacteria, and nutrients. Those are the 4 things that really are challenging our streams. So if we think about volume, the challenge that we have is impervious surface. So that means surfaces like concrete or asphalt that keep water that falls as precipitation from infiltrating the soil. And so when we have these major urbanized areas, typically, we have a lot more runoff. So that means a lot of volume. So I'm sure many of you noticed this year, we've had a couple of weeks of extensive rain. And when we have all of that rain, that water has to go somewhere. And unfortunately, like this picture on the right shows, our urban streams really suffer, and they experience a lot of stream bank erosion. So this graphic, I think, really tells the story about what happens when it rains. I ask a lot of questions in my presentations, but it's just really to kind of get you thinking about it. So on the left, we have a natural ground cover landscape. So these are our woodlands and our farmlands. And so when we have these type of landscapes, when it rains, we only lose about 10% to runoff. But when we have developed landscapes, which would be our cities and towns, we get as much as 55% of the rain that falls to the ground as runoff. That's a huge difference in the amount of water that's moving off of the land and going directly into a stream or river. And there are some water quality impacts because of that. And so the main one that we would see is sediment, and we will see additional stream bank erosion. But we also get sediment from maybe construction activities, tillage activities on the farm. If we have a timber harvest, we could see erosion that's coming from those activities. And so that's why we encourage the use of best management practices to control erosion, because we don't want that soil moving off the landscape and into our water bodies. We also have pathogens in our streams, and this is something that none of us really want. We don't really like to talk about it, but pathogens can get into our streams and rivers from failing septic systems in a rural landscape, but also failing sanitary sewers in urban landscapes. And that's much more common than we like to think about. Livestock having full access to streams can also contribute bacteria, as well as wildlife. Sometimes wildlife gets a harder rap than what they're really responsible for. But as you see in this picture, Canada geese do make a pretty significant contribution to bacteria in some streams. The other challenge we have in our streams are excess nutrients. And we've always taught that nutrients are really good for us and we should eat a nutritious diet. And so we have to make sure that we understand what we mean when we're talking about nutrients in water quality. And that means excess nitrogen and phosphorus, and specifically excess nitrogen and phosphorus in the form of fertilizer that may be running off the landscape, or in the form of animal manures or human wastewater that are getting into the stream. So that's where nutrients come from. There's a contribution from wildlife, but not as significant as what we might see with fertilizers, manures, and human wastewater. And when I say fertilizer, that's not just agriculture, it's also in our urban landscapes, because typically in an agricultural setting, we do a decent job of monitoring and budgeting that fertilizer because it's expensive. In our urban landscapes, though, it's not that expensive to fertilize our quarter acre or less than lot that our house sits on. So sometimes we get a lot of contribution in nutrients from that. So then you may go, well, why are these nutrients really a problem? And a lot of my work is focused in that Mississippi River Basin, and I showed you this map already. And what happens is where all of that water drains to the Gulf of Mexico, when we have excess nutrients, we get a dead zone. And it's because we have excess nutrients in the water, and that promotes the growth of algae and other aquatic plants. When those things die and decompose, they take oxygen out of the water column to decompose. And so then our fish and shellfish don't have enough oxygen to live and survive. And so we get things that look like this. And this is a map of the dead zone from 2020. Every summer and in July, so July, it's coming up, the 2021 cruise in the Gulf will happen, and scientists monitor dissolved oxygen in the water. And any place where you see that red, especially, or the dark red, that means the dissolved oxygen is less than what is necessary for aquatic life to live. So some of you may be volunteer monitors in your watersheds, and you may be, monitor dissolved oxygen. We really like to see that 8 to 10 milligrams per liter level. And what you're seeing here is less than 5. So definitely a problem for aquatic life. And the impact to this is that it's impacting the fishing and shellfish industries. And so these two men I met a couple years ago, and they're here with a group of farmers and watershed professionals. And we took down to the Mississippi Gulf to talk to them about how our actions upstream impact their livelihood. And it's super important. These guys are saying that their families have been fishing and shrimping for generations, and now they have to go farther out into the Gulf, which costs them more fuel. And when what they catch isn't as great or as big of a size as what they used to catch. So it really is impacting the industry. So it's important for us upstream to start to learn what we can do to help and lessen those impacts that go downstream. So the question again, what can you do? Because this seems like a really big issue. If somebody says to me, hey, can you solve the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico? Well, that's kind of a big task. And so what can we do as individuals? So my next question to you is, think about this. What is leadership? What does that mean to you? And in the simplest form, to me, leadership is just influencing others. In Extension, we do this quite a lot. We give recommendations, we follow research-based information and share that information with farmers, with woodland owners, with homeowners, so that they can make better decisions on their property. And last year, we saw that it doesn't have to be face-to-face always, even though some of us prefer that. We also can do that virtually. This is an image from a farmer-to-farmer shop talk that we had. And so we tried to recreate what happens when a bunch of farmers get together at a field day. And we had farmers share with other farmers from across the whole river basin what works for them. So Cody Rakes is a farmer here in Kentucky, and he was sharing strategies that he uses on the farm that he manages in terms of conservation. And so in doing so, in sharing what he knows, he's being a leader. And I also wanted to share this slide, and I borrowed this slide from Lois Morton at Iowa State University, but I think it sums it up, that leadership is the ability to influence others and obtain followers. And so each person in these images, they are using different strategies for leadership, but in a sense, they are all serving as leaders, whether they're in a decision-making type situation, whether they're just sharing information that they have learned from their own research, or like the two gentlemen sitting on the tailgate, that peer-to-peer learning is super important with sharing information because they trust one another. And it's not just some expert at the university, telling them what they found in their research. Those fellows know from firsthand experience on their property what worked for them and what didn't. So how can farmers, woodland owners, homeowners, and residents be leaders in their watersheds? First and foremost is that peer-to-peer exchange. And so that's something like hosting a field day. Whether or not you think you've got something awesome on your farm or in your woodland to share, simply being a host of a field day provides an opportunity for others like you, like-minded individuals, or those maybe that aren't like-minded, to come and learn and talk about, how they have made decisions on the farm and if they've had success with conservation practices. And also being a mentor, sharing that information one-on-one, helps you, and it helps a young person to learn how to better manage their landscape. Consultation is a form that leadership can take, and that might be serving on a conservation district board. And many of our viewers, and I know working with the Woodland Owners Association, many of those folks also serve on their conservation districts. So they're playing a bigger role in their local community. Also a watershed level decision maker. That might be a formal leadership role. Maybe that's an elected position, or maybe that's just being, really speaking out and getting involved in a watershed project. Maybe it's helping direct the financial resources as to how best to put practices on the ground. And then finally, all of these things really can be wrapped up by leading by example. And so a lot of us, even though we may not think of ourselves as leaders, people watch what we do and they listen to what we say. And that is a way to lead by example. So I want to just make a note too about a video that we made a couple of years ago that highlighted some farmers that are doing work in the Mississippi River Basin. It includes some farmers from Kentucky, as well as other practitioners who are working with farmers or who are working at water utilities. Because ultimately, if we think about this, not all of our water goes to the Gulf of Mexico. Some of it we are withdrawing and using in our homes. That's our drinking water. So everything that happens upstream is going to impact us, maybe not just directly by the surface water that flows through our property, but it can impact us in the water that we're drinking every day. So Renee's going to drop the link in the chat box there to this YouTube video. So hopefully you'll have time and take a look at that. And the other thing I want to tell you too and encourage you to do is utilize this Kentucky Water Health Portal website. This is a way that you can search by county, maybe a stream or lake name, or if you have a specific address, you can put it into this system and this website, and you can check out the quality of water in your local stream or river. And once you put that in, you can find your segment on the screen and click on it, and then this water health status will pop up. And it will give you a glimpse into what the quality of the water is in your local watershed. And it may also give you information about the river basin that you live in and what's going on in that basin. So that last thing I want to say is get out and enjoy Kentucky's water resources. Remember, we have 90,000 miles of streams and rivers. Go out and enjoy them, whether that's passive recreation or whether you're boating or kayaking. We were just talking earlier today about the joys of being on the water. It's a great time of year to get out, and we have some really beautiful water resources. So check those out. If you need more information about water, of course, go to your local extension office, or you can contact me directly. I'll look forward to answering any questions you might have, and really encourage you to be a leader in your local watershed.
Well, thank you so much, Amanda. We greatly appreciate that. And, I learned a whole lot during your presentation, and I'm sure a lot of other people did too. But one thing I was wondering is, how do you think folks could get more training leadership in their communities? How can they get more training to do this?
So, and that's a good question, Renee, because it kind of can be a little intimidating to think, oh, I want to be a leader in my watershed. Right. So a couple of ways. One really great way is to check out Kentucky Watershed Watch, and that's a volunteer network of folks who are monitoring streams or rivers in their local area, and you can become a part of that network of other volunteers. And there's lots of information that is shared among those folks. But also I want to say too, that part of the work that I've been working on the last several years has been to develop some leadership training modules. So this is really focused toward farmers and woodland owners and landowners in the Mississippi River Basin. And so after July, those will be ready. So there's a little teaser, it's coming soon. We will have that curriculum available, and it will be available for county agents to use and other folks that are kind of in that leadership role already to help train residents, farmers, and woodland owners. So it's coming soon, and it's nothing intimidating at all. And it's a really great way to get more information and ease into that kind of leadership role.
Okay, wonderful.
Great presentation. Really appreciate it, Amanda. And, you know, and we'll have you back when you get that stuff ready to, so you can share it with our From the Woods Today audience, because I'm sure there's a lot of folks out there that will take you up on trying to become better leaders. But
great.
You know,
I hope so.
Yeah, me too. You know, a lot of times with woodland management, you know, I think sometimes the water and the impact that our trees have on the water gets overlooked by a lot of folks, but I really appreciate you kind of drawing that out and highlighting just how important our woodlands are here in Kentucky. You know, they cover nearly half the state and they play such an important role. So even if you're not managing them for timber, just think about that water, right? And
absolutely.
High quality water. So there's reasons to manage beyond just timber resources. So yeah. I think that is encouragement to do so.
I will. Question that just came in.
Okay, I will say, Billy, in response to that, I have seen some maps that the Kentucky Division of Water developed from their monitoring of nutrients. The sections of our state that are covered in forests typically do not have nutrient issues. So it is a very clear picture. If you were to overlay those maps, you would see that those trees and woodlands are playing a really significant role in keeping nutrients out of our streams and rivers and on the landscape where they should be.
Yeah, and I'm going to say, before we get to that question, Renee, there's been some programs in the past, I know, Dr. Gumbert, about basically paying landowners to do practices that would help water quality and too. So are you familiar with any that might be available now? I guess we have NRCS programs, but I know up in Northern Kentucky at one time, some of those power companies had put together some incentives, but I know those may come around occasionally.
They do, and there was some nutrient credit trading that was piloted through EPRI in the northeastern part of Kentucky. I don't know that they are actively taking new applicants, but there's always a lot of chatter of how do we incentivize farmers, woodland owners to do more conservation practices, and how can we compensate them? Because when we have these lands that, like you said, even if you're not doing a timber harvest, if you're doing woodland management, or even if those woods are what we might say is sitting idle, they're not idle at all, and they are providing ecosystem services. And so we're always trying to figure out how we, again, compensate those landowners so that they will be incentivized to keep them that way, and not be as incentivized to change that practice. So
that's exciting to hear. I know we're seeing a lot of that action, at least for our woodland owners, with carbon markets.
Right.
Right now there's probably 5 or 6 different kind of opportunities for our woodland owners to sell basically carbon credits from their woodlands. So it'll be great when they can start selling some water credits too, because they do so much. Our woodland owners do so much for our society, and if we can help them, that's always good.
Yeah, absolutely. So I see there's a question about who should have an ag water quality plan and how do you get started? That's an excellent question. If you have 10 acres or more involved in agriculture or silviculture in Kentucky, then you need an ag water quality plan. So even if you say, oh, well, I'm not managing my woodlands really, and I just mow a field for hay, you still need an ag water quality plan. You're going to have a pretty simple one, but you still need a water quality plan. And the first place to start is to visit your local conservation district office. They can help you with resources. A little also insider information is that there is a new tool available for developing water quality plans, but I think I'll talk about that later this summer once that really gets ramped up and running. But go and check out your local conservation district, and they can direct you to the right resources.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. You've been a wealth of knowledge, as always. We greatly appreciate you coming.
Well, thanks for having me.
No, great. Thanks. Look forward to seeing you in the future.
All right, so moving on to our ever popular tree.
Yes, a tree of the week, and we have Laurie with us today. Laurie's been out doing programming all over the state. You just led a giant camp for our forest leadership program recently, so I'm good to have you back, Laurie.
Yeah, and it's great to be back. This week we are doing a relatively small understory tree. And we've done a relative of it, the American hornbeam. This week we're doing Eastern Hophornbeam. It's a tree that's scattered throughout our state, not in huge numbers, but one of those small understory trees. So check out Eastern Hophornbeam.
Wonderful.
I'm Laurie Thomas with the University of Kentucky Forestry and Natural Resources Extension, and I'm here with the tree of the week, the Eastern Hophornbeam. Eastern Hophornbeam, Astraea virginiana, is a small deciduous tree in the Betulaceae or birch family, and there are 3 species of Astraea that are native to North America. The common name is derived from the hardness of its wood and the hop-like fruit. It's also known as American Hophornbeam, hornbeam, leverwood, and ironwood. Trees typically grow about 20 to 40 feet tall and 7 to 10 inches in diameter. Hophornbeam is considered a short-lived, small to medium-sized understory tree, and it's classified as shade tolerant. It has a rounded to oval top with fine or slender horizontal drooping branches. The tree is not typically large enough to be commercially important for lumber, but it makes an attractive landscape tree and does provide food for wildlife. Eastern Hophornbeam is found throughout the eastern half of the United States into Canada, with populations found in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. It can grow in a variety of soils, but is typically found on rocky forest and sloped areas both in the bottomlands and uplands. Where timber management is a concern, it's usually considered a weedy species. In the urban setting, it tolerates drought and heavy clay soils and makes an attractive small landscape tree. The leaves are alternately arranged on the twig and simple in form. They're oval to broadly lance-shaped, narrowing to a point at the tip. They're about 3 to 5 inches long and with doubly serrated margins. They tend to be green above and pale below, and kind of fuzzy in the axils of the leaf veins. They resemble other birch species leaves. Autumn color is yellow to golden reddish, and leaves tend to drop early in the fall. Hophornbeam is monoecious, which means the tree has both male and female flowers. The male flowers are preformed, typically 1-inch long catkins, and they're usually in groups of 3. They are said to resemble a bird's toes. The male flowers develop in late summer, preceding the female flowers, and are present throughout the winter. The female flowers appear in early spring and are in slender light green catkins that are less than 1/2 inch long, and the flowers are wind-pollinated. The fruit is a 1/4 of an inch nutlet that's enclosed in a dried leafy sac which resembles a hop. There are several enclosed nutlets hanging from a single stem. The fruits ripen in fall and begin to break up, and seeds are mostly wind dispersed throughout fall into early winter. However, birds do provide some dispersal. Trees begin seed production around 25 years of age. The bark is smooth and reddish-brown with horizontal lenticels on young trees, and as the tree ages, the bark turns light brown and develops a shreddy appearance of loose scales or plates. The wood is extremely hard, and it has a high cutting resistance and is difficult to work. The sapwood is pale yellow, and the heartwood is light brown with a somewhat reddish hue. It is rated as non-durable to decay resistance. Overall, Hophornbeam is considered as of secondary importance to wildlife. Deer only browse it incidentally. However, the buds and catkins are an important food source in the winter for ruffed grouse, and the nuts are eaten by wild turkey, bobwhite, red and gray squirrels, pheasant, purple finch, grosbeaks, and downy woodpeckers. Hophornbeam is not a timber tree due to its size, but the wood has been used for small specialty products like tool handles, posts, mallets, wooden ware, and golf clubs. The national champion eastern hophornbeam as of 2021 is in Oxford, Maine, where it was planted in 1812 on Paris Hill. It is 75 inches in circumference, 65 feet tall, with a 34-foot crown spread. The Kentucky champion eastern hophornbeam is in Franklin County. It's 55 inches in circumference, 90 feet tall, with a 35-foot crown spread. If you'd like to know more about champion trees, check out American Forest National Champion Trees or check out the Kentucky Division of Forestry Champion Trees. Now for a few fun facts about eastern hophornbeam. The hardwood was once used for sleigh runners, and Native Americans used the inner wood to treat toothaches and sore muscles. The common name of hophornbeam is derived from the hop-like fruits. Another common name for this tree is ironwood due to its extremely hard wood that has been known to dull the saw blade. The scientific name Austraea is from the Greek and means a tree with hard wood, and Virginiana means from Virginia. I hope you get the opportunity to get out into your woodland, local park, or neighborhood this year and enjoy our beautiful trees and maybe even get a chance to see the interesting eastern hophornbeam.
Thank you, Lori. We greatly appreciate you doing that for us. And I was wondering, where are other species found in North America?
Thank you. There are just 3 different Austraea species. We have eastern hophornbeam. Also, a lot of people just refer to it as hophornbeam, but because it's found in the eastern half of the United States. The other 2 species, there's Knowlton's hophornbeam, which is found in Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, and then Chiso's hophornbeam, which is only found in a very small pocket of Texas. So it doesn't, we've got the big one. Ours is the most widespread with the eastern hophornbeam, but it's a cool little tree. And you've probably seen it when you've been out in the woods and just really haven't thought about it because it's one of those kind of understory trees that maybe we don't look at. It's not real big in diameter, but its bark is interesting and those fruits are really cool. That's when you usually notice it. We loved it in dendrology because we took that in the fall and that was a giveaway. If we didn't remember bark, we'd remember that fruit, that it was that's hophornbeam. So yeah.
So would this be a good one to plant in your backyard if you were in the city?
If you're looking for a small tree, you can plant it. It does tolerate, kind of heavy soils, which we tend to have in our urban areas. But it is sensitive. It would be better in a backyard because it's sensitive to salt and stuff like that we put on our roads. So you'd have to be careful. And locating when to purchase might not be the easiest endeavor, but you'd have to check around with some of our nurseries, your local nurseries, to see if you could to find one of those.
We do have a question. I don't know if you can answer this, but it says, why did the tree spread from Texas to Guatemala but skipped Mexico?
Well, you'll notice if you look at go back to that range map, that there are little bitty pockets of it all the way down through Mexico as well. But we have those larger populations, little groups in those other Central American countries.
Okay, wonderful.
Very cool tree. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. Thank you, Lauren. Appreciate it. Oh, very cool. I always love those segments.
I do too. You can learn a whole lot about trees you don't even know.
I know. I've been around trees for a long time, and every time I learn something new about these species. So yeah, thank you, Laurie. And now we've got
Speaking of trees,
our resident forest health expert, Dr. Ellen Crocker. Hey, Ellen.
Hey, everyone. Nice to be here this week.
what's bugging our tree, Ellen?
Well, that's what we're going to find out. So this time of year, your oaks in particular can start to look a little ragged. And I'm going to be talking about one of the things that can impact oak leaves, and we've been seeing more of it lately. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about what's causing all those holes in your oak leaves.
All right, wonderful. Well, let's go ahead and play that.
All right.
Are you seeing holy oak leaves? It could be the work of the oak shothole leaf miner. This time of year, they can cause holes in leaves and dark blotches. It's caused by an insect, and while it can look bad, it typically doesn't really hurt the tree in the long run. In this edition of What's Bugging My Tree, we're going to talk about the oak shothole leaf miner, what it is, and how it damages your trees. Oak shothole leaf miners are actually tiny flies. They're called leaf miners because the larvae, the babies of this fly, mine inside the leaves. They mine between the upper and the lower surfaces, and they eat all that juicy green stuff, leaving these dark blotches in leaves that you can actually peel back and find a larvae in. But that's not the only damage they do. In the early spring, the female flies use their ovipositors, their normal egg-laying devices, to pierce holes in leaves and then suck the sap from these. As their ovipositor pierces these holes, it will result in tiny pinprick holes in those newly emerging leaves and buds. And as those expand, those will enlarge, and you'll get kind of large holes throughout those trees. Those can even look symmetrical if those holes happened when they were in the buds, still all crumpled up. Their offspring, the leaf miner larvae, can cause various types of damage on leaves, from tunnel-like patterns to more blotchy patches of dead tissue in the early summer. Once they're done, the larvae drop from the leaves and overwinter in the soil, leaving the leaves looking ratty and damaged for the rest of the season. The oak shothole leaf miner produces two types of damage on oaks. First, those holes that are made by the females when they pierce the leaf and then suck the sap from them. And second, the blotches that are the signs of the leaf miner larvae inside the leaf eating. The blotch mines could be mistaken for all sorts of other oak issues, including anthracnose, and anthracnose could be mistaken for it. But a close examination will provide some distinguishing features between the two. In particular, those leaf mines, you can kind of peel off that upper surface, revealing this inside area where the larvae has been eating. You'll find signs of the oak shothole leaf miner on all sorts of different species of oak, as well as a few other species like chestnut. Although the leaf damage caused by the oak shothole leaf miner looks dramatic, it probably isn't a major concern for the health of your tree. These insects tend to go through natural booms and busts. The past few years, in 2019 and 2020, were big years for the oak shothole leaf miner with lots of damage on trees. This year doesn't seem to be so bad. If you can't stand the sight of the holy leaves, just wait a couple years and see if it resolves itself. Management is really tricky with this one, and mostly not warranted because it's not really hurting the tree. Management's tough because by the time you notice those symptoms, that adult female that was causing those holes is already long gone, and the leaf miner is inside of those leaves already maturing. Thanks for joining me today and learning a little bit about the oak shothole leaf miner. Make sure to follow us online and on social media to learn more.
We appreciate you doing that. And you said that this really doesn't hurt the trees.
Well, that's a good question. And that's what I'd normally say. I'd say that this is, no big deal. You'll see it every year, some years more, some years less. And it causes these little holes in leaves and those little brown patches, but those trees can still photosynthesize. They can still get their energy, and it's not really going to hurt the trees. Maybe a little stress, but nothing major. And especially because those populations tend to go up and down, it's something that a healthy oak can recover from just fine. But I would say that the past couple years, we have had a lot more oak shothole leaf miner. So 2020 was just a boom year all across the region. And so that kind of caused people to pause and consider, is something changing about this? Is there something new with this situation? So I'd say that my advice to people who are seeing this is don't worry, it's probably fine. In general, forest health specialists across the area are looking at this more and more and trying to understand, is there something changing? What does this mean for our trees? So I know that a friend of our program, Alexander Blevins in Kentucky Division of Forestry, this is definitely on their radar as well, trying to kind of get an assessment of what's going on. But I will say that this year I've seen a lot less of it than I did last year or the year before. So maybe it's kind of returning to normal.
Yeah. You mentioned some things that impact oaks, right now, but what other things make oak look bad?
Well, this time of year, summertime, lots and lots of different things. So one of the best things about oak trees is that they are powerhouses when it comes to supporting a diversity of wildlife, a diversity of insects. Hundreds of different species of insects could live on a single oak. That also means that this time of year, their leaves might look a little scuzzy. They might have different galls on them, different insect galls, which I might talk about in another episode of what's bugging my tree. They might have Tubercular leaf spot, which is a fungal issue, anthracnose that I mentioned earlier. There's something called oak tatters, which typically is thought to be associated with cold temperatures when those leaves are just emerging. You might see herbicide damage on trees. You might see a little bit later in the summer bacterial leaf scorch. There's a lot of different things that are out there. But in general, I would say that our oaks are really healthy in Kentucky. They don't have the same invasive insect or disease issues that some of the other species do, like ash with the emerald ash borer, and we want to keep them that way. So if you've got an oak tree in your landscape, in your yard, and you want to promote its health, there is a lot you can do to be thinking about that. Things like mulching that tree properly, giving it a nice mulch ring that's going to be a couple inches thick, but not a big volcano. Maybe watering your tree if we're having a drought, but watering it deeply and occasionally rather than like a little sprinkle every day. Things that promote the health of those trees in landscape settings. And as our earlier speaker mentioned, Amanda Gumbert, trees, they don't need to be fertilized for the most part in our area, certainly not your oaks. That'll probably do more harm than good, even in the landscape setting, although it depends on your site and what you've got. And similarly in our woods, things that promote the health of your trees are always good, even though for the most part, our oaks, while they might have some beat up leaves here and there, they're doing well.
Okay.
Ellen, I'm so glad that you and Alexandra and others are keeping an eye on all these things that are happening in our forests and reporting back. And thank you all for all the work you do. It's so important and so vital. So,
oh, thanks for having me on today. And I would encourage anyone, when you see these little blotch mines on your oaks or little galls on your oaks, if you've got kids or if you're just a kid at heart, cut those open and look inside and you might see something cool. You might learn a little bit about what's causing those symptoms that you're seeing on your tree, from like tiny little larvae that are in there hiding, having a banquet.
We want to do that outside though, right?
That might be good.
Excellent. Thank you, Ellen. Appreciate that. What's bugging my tree segments. Yes.
Thank you. See you all soon.
Yes, thank you. Renee,
another great show.
I know. I tell you, it was really good. We learned about watersheds and the importance and some leadership opportunities associated with living in watersheds and making them more healthy. We learned about a really cool tree, and then we learned about something you may be seeing out in your woods right now. So we covered a lot of ground, but we really thank you all for being with us this week.
Definitely. And if you miss anything on our shows, you can always go to fromthewoodstoday.com and watch reruns of our shows. Or, if you're like me, you're like, oh, what did they say about that? I can't remember. And it's going to be right there. So, and then also you can submit questions for us.
Yes, yeah, we have a little survey link there that you can submit if you want us to cover something, or if you've seen something you're not sure of. You can upload a picture, whatever. Just communicate with us. Use that little link on fromthewoodstoday.com, and we'll communicate back with you and maybe feature something that you've got on the show.
Definitely, we've done it before. I'm sure we will do it again.
Yes.
So until then, we will see you next week at 11 o'clock. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone.